September 2022 was a very special time in the Zelda community. After years and years and years of anticipation, Nintendo finally released the title for what we had previously called Breath of the Wild 2, and with it, a sweet, sweet release date of May 12th. Not too far in the future, less than a year away. Very, very exciting. But it was also a very exciting time in my life, for I had recently discovered that I was pregnant with baby number 2. And that it would be due, get this, exactly 2 weeks after Tears of the Kingdom released. In my first pregnancy, I discovered that I was not a salmon. It was not the time to be swimming upstream, trying as hard as I could to do things. It was time to let go and go with the flow. So, that basically scrapped all of my go against the flow plans that I had created for the rest of the year and beyond, and it was time for me to pick a new path for my life for the next 8 months. And this fell directly into my lap. And so my journey for the next several months was decided. I would play through every single Zelda game in timeline order before Tears of the Kingdom was able to come out, and in the last 2 weeks of my pregnancy, I would beat Tears of the Kingdom, and bam, have every Zelda done. Go ahead and enjoy my story of doing exactly that. And so my journey began November 4th with Skyward Sword. I was 12 weeks pregnant, which means my baby was the size of a plum. Yum. And I was very excited to play Skyward Sword. It was my last 3D Zelda that I hadn't completed, so I just felt I was in for a treat. Unfortunately, that was not the case. I decided to do this playthrough with motion controls to be true to the game, and the problem was I was playing on Switch, so that kind of messed with the motion controls. I feel like Switch's motion detection isn't as good as the Wii was because it had the bar to tell the system, like, this is the screen. I could be wrong about that. In Skyward Sword, they expect you to do, like, precise slashes with the direction you want, like, in time with where the enemy's blocking. So if they're blocking here, you gotta slash like that. And either it was the Switch's problem or my problem, but I would go and do a slice and maybe do like a little flick at the end, like a whoosh kind of a thing, and then it'd be like, oh yeah, you just did a diagonal. It's like, why can't you listen to the 80% of me going this way? Why are you listening to the 20% of me going that way? So it ended up being really annoying, and I never got the hang of it. I ended up getting tennis elbow from it because I was at the point in my pregnancy where my joints are getting loose, so here's this joint loosening and I'm flinging it around like crazy. And it hurt, and it made it hard to sleep, but I guess now I have a story. And bad motion controls just made playing the game in general very unpleasant. It sucks to spend a whole game thinking about the controls instead of just thinking about playing. Like, I have to sit there being like, oh, I gotta slash like this. Like, and when I play other games, I'm not like, oh, I gotta press A now. It's like, you naturally go, okay, da-da-da-da-da-da. And that just never happened with the motion controls, which is so sad, so sad, because you would think motion controls would be natural. So I don't know if it was a me thing or the Switch misreading it, but never came naturally. And the other part of the game I really looked forward to was flying. I thought this is going to be fantastic. It's going to be like the Wind Waker moment where you have the open sea and you're out journeying on it. This is going to be the open sky and you're out journeying on it. But they have you use motion controls to fly. I am not the bird! I am not the bird! But they're like, flap it! Flap your hand to make him fly! So you're sitting there dying like, come on, we gotta get up to this point, we gotta get up to this point. And trying to control it while doing your little flap. It made flying awful, but I guess it really didn't matter because there wasn't even much to fly to. They had little islands with chests on them, but it wasn't enough to make me want to fly around. And the other horrible part is with the flying, they had you use that to access the different areas in the world. So you would have to find the part in the cloud to dive down to that world, and you gotta flap over there, you gotta dive at the right time and all that. And I just hated it. Every time I had to go somewhere, I had to go back to Skyloft and then over to a portal. And then that means one of my favorite parts of the game was messed up, because I just love seeing the transition from one area to another and how they connect all these very different, like, lava biome with sea biome or whatever. And now it's just like, no, here's this little box here that you dive into. Here's this little box over here that you're gonna dive into. It left me not getting the enjoyment I normally get from a Zelda map, which is very sad. However, I have an even bigger problem with this map, and that is that they reuse each area like 3, 4, maybe even 5 times, which in other games they tend to do that, and they have clever ways of distinguishing the areas from the first time you visit and the second time you visit. But these areas, they're designed to be different uses each time, but it ends up being confusing the first time you go through, because you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? Especially Eldin, because in the end you do a sneaky mission through there, so they have all these things for the sneaky mission, and you're like, what is this terrain? Like, this is just weird. And when I came back for the final mission there, the sneaky mission, that's when I realized what it was all for. But before then, I was like, I don't know where I'm supposed to go. I'm missing something. What's going on here? And just all the maps. Normally, it's so fun to revisit areas when they're changed up a little bit or something. But this game, it was just really confusing, and they were annoying to traverse. It got better, like, the more you came back, because you got items that made it easier to get through them. And my final major complaint with Skyward Sword is that even the gameplay, the story itself, couldn't get away with not being annoying to me. They had this problem of just every task you did felt way too long. I don't know if I was just in the wrong mindset for it, but they would be like, okay, you gotta go do this thing now. I was like, okay, let's go do this thing. And it just felt like there was barrier after barrier after barrier after barrier to get to do the final objective they said. It just always felt too long. The, like, most pinnacle example of this is getting the Heroes song. So I finished doing all the temple stuff, and they're like, all right, you just need to go get this song. And they've had me get songs previously, but normally I just go to this island in the sky and learn the song there. This time they're like, we don't know anything about this song. You're gonna have to go to school and talk to people. I'm like, okay, maybe at the school they'll tell me the song, or maybe they'll tell me where to find that song. I go to the school and they're like, ooh, there's this mysterious whale god that was normally helpful to us, but right now he's being weird. You're gonna have to go sort that out. I was like, okay, I'll go sort that out. And they're like, but before you sort that out, we gotta make sure you're good at flying. And they had me do this dumb target thing. I think out of every Zelda game, this is probably the hardest thing I did, because you're doing mouse controls. You're flapping, and you're trying to navigate and do these, like, diving. It was so frustrating. I finally passed it. And then I go off to save this darn whale. And that was just awful. Awful, using these motion controls. You're tiring out trying to hit the little weird virus thing that's infected it. I guess it's not a virus, it's some sort of worm organism thingy. And, I'm trying to save this darn whale, but I keep getting under his fin and beat down, and I keep trying to fly. It was so stressful and awful. It was like the worst thing of playing through every Zelda game. Anyway, I finally get up. I finally defeat all those. I'm like, okay, that was hard. That was annoying. This has been the most annoying song to get. Most of them are easy peasy lemon squeezy. I'm like, all right, whale, sing me a song. And he's like, oh, you're gonna have to go down and gather from the 3 dragons. So I think, okay, fine. I meet each dragon, and they'll give me the song. No! The yellow dragon is like, I'm sick and dying, I won't give you this song unless you heal me. So you have to go to heal him. And then you go to the blue dragon, and you're like, blue dragon, I've helped you in the past, you were sick. Why are these dragons falling sick? Anyway, you were sick, I got you your hot water, everything was good and dandy, you know to trust me, you can sing me the song. But she's like, no, I decided to flood the whole area, and you're gonna have to get the song notes yourself by swimming around. And you know what swimming around does? It takes motion controls, and it was horrible gathering all these songs. And then I do that for her. I was like, okay, great. And then I go to the red dragon, and I have to do that sneak mission I mentioned where the bokoblins stole my weapons, and I kind of enjoy that whole thing happens in a few Zelda games where you lose all your weapons and you have to slowly get them back. It's kind of fun. It's strategic. So that was fine. And I get to the red dragon. I'm like, what are you going to have me do now? And then he's like, it's chill, bro. Here's the song. And I'm like, what? Why are you easy now? I was grateful. I was very grateful. But it was like, did they just run out of steam? Anyway, I feel like everything in the game, that was the worst example, but everything in the game was so dragged out. I was like, what is going on here? Are they just trying to pad the game? Are they like, this needs to be as long as Twilight Princess, so they did all this weird padding? Or is it like they knew this was their last linear game, so they were like, let's cram every idea we have into this game now? It was not fun. I mean, I hope to retry the game using non-motion controls and see if I enjoy it more, but I just feel like with the tasks being the way they are, I won't enjoy it. But now I know that it's going to happen. So maybe I'll have the expectation that they'll be long and I'll enjoy it. I'll see. I really hope to like it one day, but right now, no. I could kind of feel that this was the linear death of Zelda with the way this one went. And they kept trying to make Skyward Sword happen throughout the game. You had to lift your dumb sword, and which would be a cool thing. You motion control be like, wow! But the motion controls were always acting up, so you'd be like, what? Is that good? That good now? Yes. Oh, good. Oh, good. Finally. So I wish they didn't try to make Skyward Sword a thing, but they did. So there are some things I did enjoy, like the temples. I liked their theming. A lot of them had this religious symbolism from Eastern religions, which I thought was fun and enjoyable to see. Not all temples were good, but I think a good half of them was. Ooh, but each temple had this dumb key! So you went through the temples together, the pieces of the key for the boss room, and then you put it together, and then you have to rotate it to fit perfectly in there, and they're kind of complex. But the problem is that you had to rotate it using motion controls! I knew exactly which way I had to go, but I couldn't get the darn controller to do what I wanted. I've heard people complain about Switch motion controls in Breath of the Wild. I've never had a problem with them. But something about Skyward Sword, I had so many problems. Also, speaking of boss rooms and like the doors to them and everything, I think 2 or 3 of the temples, the boss was Girahem, which is like the little minion guy for the big bad guy in this game. I love check-in with the bad guy partway through the game, but I feel like it shouldn't be at a temple. It should be at like their lair or something. So that was kind of disappointing to not get a fun big creature boss thing, and instead it's this little Weasley disgusting guy who bleh, makes me want to puke every time I see him. Okay, back to things I like. Speaking of temple designs that I like, this pirate ship was so freaking cool. I feel like it didn't quite fit with the game, but I guess the pirate ship was from the way past, so I guess I'm fine with that. It was really, really cool. It was fun. Although, once again, the quest to get to the pirate ship just dragged on, and it was like 2 steps longer than I thought it should have been. You went to this guy's house to get some sort of clue, and then you went to this one place to find the pirate ship, and you do this roller coaster thing, which was really fun, and that was with motion control, so it was a little tricky, but it was really fun. You get to the bottom of that, there's no pirate ship. Alright, so you go over here to find the pirate ship, you don't find the pirate ship, but you find a piece of the pirate ship, and you use that to go find the pirate. Anyway. They just did this over and over and over and over and over. Okay, but the one thing I really did truly deeply like is the robots. They're so cute! I love them so much. And in the robot area, you get this stone that you carry around, and it turns the area around it into what it was like thousands of years ago or whatever. And I really enjoyed that concept. It was fun to see this desert like light up into greenery, or in the pirate area I was talking about, the sands become an ocean. So that was really cool, and I enjoyed that. Anyway, overall the story was fine. It was cute having the Link Zelda bond at the beginning, but it was kind of funny how they kept like dangling her in front of you, like, oh, you just missed her, on to the next temple, you just missed her. So, it was fine. I didn't hate it, but getting through it all I hated. I am excited to try the game again without motion controls though. Hopefully it'll be a much better experience, but with the experience I had this time, it took me 12 days to complete, and I'm giving Skyward Sword, it's my 14th favorite out of 17 Zelda games, so pretty low. Sorry, Skyward Sword. Next up in the timeline was Minish Cap, and at this point I was 16 weeks pregnant, which made my baby the size of an avocado. So I went into Minish Cap with very mixed feelings. I had heard really good things about it from people, but I'd also heard really good things about Skyward Sword from people, so I didn't know if I could trust people anymore. But I'd also played it in the past, and I got stuck at some point. I went into it skeptical. I came out of it very pleased, to say the least. I fell in love with this game. It puts the A in adorable. The art style, it's just so charming. Especially when you're shrunken down and you're seeing the world all big, like the big clovers above you. Oh, so wonderful. I love it so much. But yes, as I said, you shrink down in this game. That is Link's power now. This allows you to interact with the Minish and complete different tasks in the game. And I just love everything shrunken. I love when you're in the town and like creeping around inside buildings when you're shrunken. They have like dust bunnies and oh, it's so cute. Everything shrunken is cute. I love the shrunken temples. You get a lot of like bug type enemies and things. Ooh! The overworld when you're a normal size Link, it's okay. I don't love it quite as much. But the tiny world I love so much. When you're in tiny mode, I'm just the whole time in love. In love, in love, in love. And they also have the Sky City, which is really fun and cool. Just all around the map, the world is just gorgeous. And I love it so much. I love it, love it, love it. Love being in it. And I enjoy the puzzles too. They revolve around Link's two powers. One is the shrinking one I already talked about, and the other is the Four Sword. He can duplicate himself. You slowly earn these as you go through dungeons, so at one point you can have 2 of yourself, 3 of yourself, and then 4 of yourself. And the puzzles involved doing that, and they were really fun and good. And the mini puzzles were also good, like I gotta shrink down to do this, and then I gotta get big to do this, so I think they did a really good job balancing those two. I would say my only negatives for the game is there were these things called keenstones, and you would randomly find them here and there, and then you would match them with someone else that had the same half, and like something special would happen in the overworld that would get you like a heart piece or money or something. But the problem is every now and then they had it where you gathered them for the plot. There were gold ones that you would gather. And I don't know, just mixing the two was weird, and as someone playing more casually in a quick playthrough, I just never really got into the Keenstone thing. It felt like a side thing that was kind of main, but like, it was kind of weird. And the story is utterly forgettable. Some evil wizard turns Zelda to stone, some you rescue her, some Four Sword or something. Anyway, yeah, nothing to write home about with the story. But it only took me 4 days to complete, and keep in mind I was doing these over stream sessions and each were about 3 hours. So that's like a weekend playthrough. Definitely worth playing. Anyway, 4 days, and I give it a 7 out of 17 games. It is my favorite 2D Zelda, and I am very much looking forward to replaying it. Next up on my journey was Ocarina of Time. I was 19 weeks pregnant when I started, the size of a grapefruit. So, Ocarina of Time, what is there to say? Like, this is the BLT of Zeldas. It's a classic, like the foundation of future linear Zelda games, this game. And playing through it, I was just like, wow, you can just feel how foundational this game is. Which I'd played it before, but it really stuck out this time since I'd played a lot more Zelda games. It's your normcore Zelda. It's the basics, it's your white tea. What can I say? That grapefruit is killing me. Disgusting. Disgusting. And this plum is too hard. Link's big power in this game is time travel via placing the Master Sword and taking it out in the Temple of Time. You can go from an adult to a child. I guess it's not really time travel, it's like stasis and then reverse stasis. Anyway, so that's really good. They've done it in other games where you have this like go to a mirror world or go somewhere else in the timeline, and then that'll affect another place in the timeline. But I think Ocarina of Time does it best. You being an adult, you always know which timeline you're in. I'm like, okay, this is later on. Now I'm a kid. This is before the later on. So they did a good job there. Really enjoy it. I feel like most of the time it's clear when you gotta change back to kid form to do things. And there's really not many, once you become an adult, there's not a ton of stuff that they make you go back and be a kid for. Most of the time it's like you just want to go do stuff that was available when you were a kid, then you can go back in time. I think, yeah, there's only like the bottom of the well as a kid, and then you have to go out into the desert as a kid. But besides that, storyline, they don't make you use it that much. And I like that. It can get kind of confusing going to the past and future a bunch. And another thing I love about this game is it's the one that introduced races. I feel like that is what really got the Zelda games going. What makes this one like the foundational Zelda game is that they had Gorons and Zora, and those are fun. It's so hard to talk about this game. There's other videos of people talking about it. It's just so... it feels like it is the obvious thing. Like, this is just how it should be, and how, like, everything is just as it should be in the game. And Ocarina of Time, of course, had quite the solid story. I knew why I was doing everything the whole time. I wasn't just doing things because they told me to. I was like, yes, I gotta gather these stones to open the Temple of Time, then I gotta gather the sages to get into Ganon's thing and overthrow him. So, I'm glad they were clear, and it was fine. I wasn't, like, super invested. I wasn't like, I deeply need to save Hyrule. I was like, yeah, sure, if you want me to, I'm on it. It took me 7 days, and it places 5th for me. My 5th favorite Zelda. Beginning Majora's Mask, I was 21 weeks pregnant. The baby was the size of a cantaloupe. Majora's Mask was my most favorite Zelda game at one point, so I was very excited to dive back into it. I'd only actually played it once before. It was one of those things where I loved it so much I didn't want to, like, wear out its welcome, so I only ever played it once. And this game, your power in it is that you have these masks that turn you into different races. So you get to play as a Goron and a Zora and a Deku, and it's just good. It's good stuff. And of course, the thing that everyone talks about is that it's a Groundhog's Day game, so you're repeating the same 3 days over and over and over, which allows you to do these, like, more complex stories throughout the day, scheduled throughout, and so that's really fun. But one thing I discovered with this playthrough is that the 3-day cycle is very much a double-edged sword, where if you don't invest in the game, it's really annoying. So the first time I played through, I really invested in, like, what was going on in the town, and I was really good at scheduling out my time. If I was starting a temple and it was like 1.5 days in, I would just restart. This time I was like, I'm rushing it! We can do it in a day and a half! Most of the time I was fine, but one time it screwed me over, and it sucked having to basically redo the entire temple because of that. So I can see why some people are annoyed by the 3-day cycle. And this time, because I wasn't messing around in the town a bunch and getting invested in every, like, little thing that was going on in the schedule, I did not enjoy the game quite as much. So it's a really, really great game, but you have to be really, really invested into doing everything. In my first playthrough, I got all the masks, which is just so much fun. All the little side journeys and the quirky characters in it and the weird things that get done. It's so good how they do it all. But this time, because I was rushing, I did not do that, and the game felt really flat. Just doing the dungeons, the game just doesn't feel like it has much to it. So, my suggestion, if you're gonna play it, you have to do all the masks. Like, get involved with the community. It's not a good playthrough if you're just doing temples. And, like, speaking of temples, the last 2 temples, there's only 5. The last 2 just feel really out of place for some reason. The first 3, you're playing through them as the different species. Like, there's one for the Deku, one for the Zora, one for the Goron. But the last 2, it makes it feel like they're coming out of left field. Obviously, they don't have more races, so they don't have, like, a race mask for those ones. And, yeah, they just don't hit the same. As someone who loves collecting things, as you can see back here, getting all the masks was just a delight to me, and it does pay off in the end, which surprised me the first time I played through. If you get them all, and you do some mini games at the end on the moon, makes the last boss fight really easy. Which means this time I was so worried because I didn't get all the masks. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to actually do this boss fight, like really actually do it. I was panicking. It was a lot easier than I thought it would be, but it was still hard. And the moon! Oh, the moon. I love it. I just love depictions of the moon as like green areas or like flowery fairy stuff instead of the typical craters and things. It's just, it makes me happy. So that's Majora's Mask, and it does have a very interesting story. It really sticks in your brain, like each of the people's problems. I think in most games, the peoples are having problems, but I don't remember what their problems are after the game. But this one, I remember each one, what issues they're having. So, solid, good work on that. Took me 7 days of streaming to beat it, and I give this one a 4 out of 17 games. 4th favorite. Finally, it was time for Twilight Princess. At this point, I was 22 weeks pregnant, which means my baby was the size of an eggplant. So this was the Zelda game of my childhood, which means nostalgia may be talking here when I say this is peak linear Zelda. I love this game so much. Deeply, deeply to my core. I just feel like they did so much right and so little wrong with this one. Which you could say that about the last two, but like, this just came together so beautifully. I meant to make a bow, like you're tying a present, but here's also a heart on top of that. For me, what makes this Zelda particularly special, besides the nostalgia aspect, is that I actually cared about the characters in this game. I feel like every other Zelda game, but maybe one or two others, I don't give a crap about the characters. It's like, okay, they asked me to do this thing, so I'll do this thing, because I'm playing this game, and to play this game I need to do this thing. But in this game, I actually care. But I will admit that it took me 4 times of playing this game to get to the point where I care. So maybe that is why I like this game. So how they get you invested is having this long intro in your hometown, much longer than any other game's intro. And during it, you're not like swinging your sword around or anything. You're just helping people in the town. You're finding lost cats. You're retrieving cradles for people. It's getting you to know all the town people. Oh, and you even have your own little fan club in town. All the kids just like worship you as their like adoptive teen brother or something like that. And they're so in love with you. They're cheering you on. They think you're Mr. Schnaz Pants out here. So that's really cute. And then doing all the tasks in town get you to know their whole family. So at this point, you're attached to your town, you're attached to the people, you feel like you're a part of it. Like, obviously, Link has lived here his entire life, but you coming in as playing as Link, you don't know any of this, so they make sure to get you on the same page as Link. You're invested in this town, you're a member of it. And then they have the kids get kidnapped by monsters! And you gotta go out and get those kids back. And unlike some other Zelda games where something like that happens, it continues through the whole game. It's not like halfway through you recover your original mission, but now you're bought into other missions, so you have to keep going. It's like, your mission is the kids close to the very end. Like, until the last dungeon, you're still helping the kids. At that point, it switches over to you're helping the person who is helping you find the kids. Which brings us to Midna, the best companion in all of the Zelda series. You meet her and she's like using you, but she grows to love you and you grow to love her. And in the end, your job is to help her as the Twilight Princess reclaim her Twilight Kingdom that's trying to be taken over by Ganon. It's really cool. It's really, really cool. She helps you out when you're a wolf. That's your power in this game. You're gonna be a wolf, which lets you like dig into things and sniff scents. It's really like, when it's explained, it's a lame power, but like back then, you gotta be a wolf. That was cool. You gotta play as a wolf. Yeah, it's not the most useful power in comparison to all the other powers across all the other games, but it gets the job done. I was never confused when I had to use my wolf power. Well, most of the time they force you to use your wolf power. It's like you're trapped as a wolf now. Halfway through the game, you get to the point where you can choose, and it was always pretty clear when it was time to choose to be a wolf and when being a human was the better option. So they did a good job there. And the dungeons, I think best dungeons out of every Zelda game. Just the best. The theming is really good. They're really smooth to go through. I can't remember ever getting super stuck on any of them. Maybe Arbiter's Grounds could be tricky here or there, but like it was intentionally tricky. Just wonderful dungeons. Stick in your mind. None of them have too close of theming where you can't like separate the two in your mind. They're all very, very distinct. And Snow Peak. I just love it! It's a mansion dungeon, and you're just going through all the rooms and things, and it's frozen, and I love it so much, and I love the story there too. It's actually one of the longer Zelda games to play through, but they just do such an amazing job with the flow that it doesn't feel incredibly long. As I said with Skyward Sword, it has about the same amount of playtime, but it felt so long every step of the way. And this one, you just glide so well. I think part of how they did it is there were missions between temples, but Skyward Sword was like, this mission is to get to the next temple. So you have this temple over here, and you're starting here, and they're like, yeah, this is part of getting to here. Whereas this game, you had these missions between temples, but like they were just a separate thing. So you would start here getting to the temple. So it didn't feel like you were taking forever to get to the objective you started at. It's a separate objective. So that was well done. One of my favorite parts of the game, besides the Snow Peak mansion, is the Old West town where you save the old lady by sniping all the bokoblins. Like, for some reason, that just sticks in the craw of my heart. It's something I love so much. I don't know why. Oh, every time I get to that part in the game, I'm like, let's snipe some bokoblins. Okay, but not everything in this world is perfect. So a couple things I would say I don't love about Twilight Princess is the Twilight Palace of Twilight, whatever. It's like you gotta get an orb at the end of the thing and then bring it and put it in the thing and you have this hand looming after you. I don't like the stress. I do not like the stress of that. So that's a thumbs down for me. And the side quests are weak. I tried to think of like ones that really stood out in my mind. And most 3D Zelda games, I would say all, there's like a quest that really stands out as like, wow, that was a good time. I can't think of any for Twilight Princess. Maybe I'm just drawing a blank. I do like getting the bugs for Agatha, and I like seeing her whole thing come to life, but that's just for money, so. In conclusion, fantastic story. I love it. I love it all. There's not a lot of Zelda. She's not really a focal point in this game. She's just kind of there in the background. So that is one thing that games after Twilight Princess did a good job of really focusing in on Zelda. I feel like previous games, like she was there and sometimes she mattered, but it wasn't as big of a thing. Anyway, took me 9 days to complete, and I give this one 2 out of 17. It's my second favorite Zelda game. Favorite linear game to play. With the completion of Twilight Princess, we're on to a new timeline split. We're going from the hero wins to the hero never shows up. Kid timeline, they never discover him. He never goes out to do anything. And that brings us to Wind Waker. Now I was a nice 25 weeks pregnant, so the baby was the size of a papaya. I grabbed the biggest papaya I could, and now I realize the baby was probably not this big. You can see how big the cantaloupe was. This is another childhood classic. Not quite as classic, though, as the last 3 games I went through, but still very classic. I can't think of any sort of special power you have in this game. Like, you have your wand. You are the Wind Waker. But that just changes the directions of the winds and a couple other things. It's not anything big, which I end up having mixed feelings about this game. It's kind of easy. It's kind of short on the content. The map is pretty empty. It's like all ocean, and like you have islands throughout, but most of them, maybe like a third of them, are you there to get money on that island or nothing necessary to the game. So that's not good. I'm gonna admit this is really rude, but I don't give a crap about Link's sister. That's who you're supposed to be rescuing in this game. And I don't care about her. Sorry. But yeah, nothing heinously bad or anything. I feel like I'm just more apathetic towards this game, which I feel bad. People really, really love this one, and I can see why they do. I just feel like it could be better. It could be bigger, more, better. The pirates are sick. I agree. It's fun that you're uniting with pirates in this game. That's really cool. I love the art style, of course. Traversing the sea, they somehow made really, really good. They have these money barrels to make it fun if you're like just cruising for too long. And it's just fun to get out on the open ocean. And seeing an island in the distance and then going for it is very cool, provided the island is actually worth visiting. And when they are worth visiting, they're worth visiting, I will say that. For me, the big highlight of this game, though, is that they introduced 2 new species, the Rito and the Korok, and both of these hit hard. Very good. I didn't mention this with Skyward Sword, but it introduced, like, 3 species if you count the robots, and I like the robots. The hedgehog bushes, I was okay with. They're a little weird, but I was okay with them. But the mole things, the mole sloths, I was not okay with them. I did not like them. Oh, and they introduced the squid octopus something people. They made me feel iffy. I don't know what to think about those ones. Anyway, back to it. Rito and Korok, I love them so much. And I'm so happy in this game they do 2 temples where you use them to get through it. You accompany Medley through, I think, the Shadow Temple, and you throw her to fly up onto things, and then you can become her and do things up there. I just love that mechanic. I think it's super fun, and I'm glad they did that. That, like, is a really big standout part of this game. And then you get to be with Makar. He's right there. I love him so much. So he can fly, and you can control him. And then when he walks, he does this ding, 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 like he has a little bell in him or something. He's so cute. I made that little Makar after my first time playing Wind Waker because I love him so much. Anyway, so that's like the highlight of the game, is going through those temples with them, which unfortunately the Shadow Temple is really creepy with Medley. I wish it was prettier. But Makar's temple that you go through, it's all green and nice and I like it. This game also has some pretty solid side quests. There's one where you are delivering love letters for a bokoblin and a girl that was previously captured by. That one's fun. Yeah, just it has quirky side quests as one would expect in a Zelda game, and I enjoy those. One thing that I thought would be a side quest, but ended up being part of the main quest, was this ghost ship, and oh my goodness, you'll randomly see it, and then but if you try to go towards it, it'll disappear until you get like this special map that lets you on it. So that was really fun, my first playthrough, not this one, but past playthroughs, seeing it and being like, what is this ghost ship? And then you get the key and go in on it, and it's kind of disappointing. It's just like a little puzzle that you have to solve. It's nothing extraordinary, which is kind of a bummer, but it's cool until you find out that it sucks. And another thing I love about this game is your companion in this game. He's probably my second or third favorite, the Red King of Lions. He's your ship, and I just love his like little grumble he does. I don't know, he's solid. I like him, and he's like a big crucial part of the story. They let in on that a little late. No, it's like midway. It's okay amount into the game, but side companions that are a big part of the story, but you don't know it until you get there, like midway through. I like that. I'm for that. Overall, I do like this story. It's really, really cool. They, like, have this whole Hyrule, because the hero didn't come to save Hyrule, the king had it flooded to save it from Ganon, like, trap him down there, and then everyone moved up into the mountains. But are you saving Hyrule if you're just trapping it under the water, is the question. Overall, good story. It has a really solid ending. I don't want to spoil it. Sorry, I'm being kind of vague, but the ending's cool. Wind Waker is just, I think people love it so much because it's a very good starting game in Zelda. Like, the first one I ever played was Twilight Princess, which is a bad idea. It's very hard to beat your first time through if you're, like, not that skilled at Zelda games yet. So Wind Waker is a very good beginning, and I think people have fondness with it because of that. I just feel like they could have had more, and I know there was issues with development of it, and that's why it's a little bit short, and I feel like there could have been more polish here and there. It's not getting what it deserves, okay? So, it took me 6 days to beat, and it is my 6th favorite Zelda game out of 17 games. Fun fact about Wind Waker that I didn't know until doing this playthrough is that it has a sequel! That brings us to Phantom Hourglass. Just a short week later, I was 26 weeks pregnant, still the size of a papaya. I went into this game knowing nothing and curious to see what would happen. This was like the beginning of my 2D Zelda streak, so 3D Zeldas were over. I had nothing to look forward to at this point, and it was all just going to be 2D from now on. So I was going in this one like, okay, first 2D, I hope I enjoy it. I really hope it's good and that I love it, and it starts off strong! I think Tetra, which is Wind Waker Zelda, she falls into the ghost ship that I mentioned from before, and you gotta follow her. And I was like, yes, the ghost ship, it's gonna be more this time! Yes, yes, yes! I was so excited! So excited for this ghost ship. And it turns out the ghost ship teleports you to another world! Woo! And I guess you get booted off the ghost ship, I can't remember exactly. Because you end up on a beach and this old man finds you, and that begins your journey. And it turns out it is a very crappy journey. This was a game with some bad mechanics. Let's put it that way. So, the jewel of this game is the Temple of the Ocean King, which, after every temple you do, you have to return to and go through again for some reason. I think it's to get a map that unlocks the area that has the next temple in it, I'm guessing. A lot of Zelda games do this, like, before a temple, you have to go do a thing to get access to that temple. So it's not that crazy, but this is the first time they had you going back to the same place over and over. And they just layered on problems with this Temple of the Ocean King. So first off, the name of the game, Phantom Hourglass. You have this hourglass that has sand in it. That is your time limit for being in the Temple of the Ocean King before dying or something. I don't know. Bad consequences. And there are like special areas you can stand on so the time doesn't pass. Anyway, so you have this hourglass. Your time is limited. But you also have to sneak around these guards. If they catch you, they go after you, and they take your time, and they take your hearts, which is not good. And on top of that, you can't kill these things. So you spend the whole time having to sneak around, but you're also on a time limit, unless you're in one of these special boxes. And to like put the final nail in the coffin of making this horrible, you have to do this over and over again. So you finish a temple, you have to repeat the levels you already did. Once you get like halfway through, they like do a portal, but I think the first level you repeat 3 times. It's just awful. If they took away one of these things, it could have been okay, but awful, awful, awful. You spend most of the time standing in one of those boxes because the time doesn't pass if you're in a box and they can't see you in the box. So you're just sitting there waiting for your moment to run out, figure out like the floor, what's going on, what the puzzle is, what your plan has to be, and then running from them. And part of it is my problem. I'm a little overly cautious, so I'll give them that, but it's not a fun time. I can't even remember any other part of the game because I was spending so much time in the Temple of the Ocean King. When I think of this game, I only see that temple instead of everything else they created, which is very sad. Okay, the other problem with this game is that they were like, buttons? Buttons? That was so, like, early 90s. What are you talking about? Touchscreens all the way. This entire game, you gotta use the touchscreen. You control Link with the touchscreen, which makes combat really dumb, because all you do is click on the enemy, and then he goes and slashes it. It can't be some complex, like... In 2D Zeldas, the combat is kind of the point. You're, like, doing these dodges, and it's not, like, super crazy, but you're, you know, having to line things up and time them. But when you just tap and kill, it's really, really dumb. It also hurt my hands. I guess as an adult, I can't be playing on a tiny DS and being like dee, 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 all the time. However, it was satisfying being able to trace paths for my weapons, like your boomerang you could do an exact path for, and your bomb chew you could, and like you surprisingly got pretty fast at it, so that was very cool. What wasn't cool is during the final boss fight, to do your like power move against him to defeat him, you had to draw an hourglass on the bottom screen in the middle of combat. So I'm over here trying to dodge him with the touchscreen, I guess, because you only control Link through the touchscreen. But I'm also trying to draw an hourglass. It was awful. He would just, he whittled me down so much, me trying to get a hang of it. And I Googled, like, how do you do this? Because it's not working for me. And people were like, oh, just draw an infinity sign. It's easier. So I was doing that. I did like 100. And then finally, I don't know what little incremental thing I changed, the game started recognizing it, and I was able to regularly do this hourglass for them. It was ridiculous. So anyway, I get whittled down at like the first part of the boss fight, And then the second part of the boss fight, I have 2 hearts to complete that, which is really dumb. But the second part of the boss fight was kind of cool. On the top screen, you had like Zelda's vision of it or something like that. I can't quite remember what it was. And then you had to go based off of that, do your move. It was kind of cool. A cool way to use the double screens. Oh, speaking of the DS and like double screens and things, this game loved using the DS gimmicks. Like, you got a map from the Ocean of the Temple King, the Temple of the Ocean King, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And you had to do different things using the DS's powers to make the map useful. Like, the first time you had to blow on it using the mic, and then the dust would clear. So that was kind of cool. I think one time you rubbed it to clear the dust. But it's also like, how are you going to port this to other systems now? Oh, but the ghost ship. The whole thing that got us started on this journey. I was so excited to get back to the ghost ship. Midway through the game, you get there! And you go on the ghost ship. You're looking to get Zelda back. You're like, come on, Zelda. I'm going to find you. I'm going to rescue you. I'm the hero and all that. And you come across these 3 sisters, and they are suspect as can be. They're like doing little giggles and like you can just sense that they have knives in their pockets or something, and you gotta rescue all 4 sisters. It's a big thing, and you just feel like a lamb being brought to the slaughter, but you are the lamb bringing yourself to the slaughter, and you're dragging them back because they're gonna tell you where Zelda is, and they end up being the boss for the ghost ship. So you fight them. It was an okay fight. It was your typical ping pong Zelda battle. So, I am here editing right now, and something kind of interesting came up, as you may have noticed, or maybe not noticed if you're not someone who looks at the screen like I don't. So far, I've only had to borrow footage 3 times. Once for the whole Skyward Sword debacle, the worst, like, day of playing Zelda in the whole period of 9 months, and I forgot to hit record, so I borrowed footage for that. But the other 2 I've had to borrow is because my footage corrupted, and both of them are the streams where I did the ghost ship. Coincidence? Some might say. I think not. But who knows? A little bit spooky. And while I'm going through the effort to insert this, I just want to let you know there are some like little factoids, little things here and there that I am getting wrong. And I know as an Animal Crossing player, whenever I watch an Animal Crossing video by someone who's like not super into Animal Crossing and they get their little tidbits wrong, it kind of annoys me. So I'm sorry for any Super Zelda lovers out there when I say something like, an old man wakes you up at the beach, it was a fairy, okay? And there's just lots of little things, and I think I explained the timeline thing wrong. I have no clue the difference between the adult and child timeline, which causes each, like, why it branches there. I thought I did after playing Wind Waker. Like, I came to my own conclusion, but I was just watching a Zelda video and they said something else, so I don't know. I don't know what made that happen. So, there you go. And thank you so much for watching this far. I know this video is a behemoth, but this was 9 months of my life. So, thank you for watching. I hope you're enjoying. And, yeah. There you go. Back to the video. Yeah, I was so excited about the ghost ship. The mysteries of the ghost ship. What's going on here? And you get in, and I guess the sister thing is kind of interesting, but it's not that cool. It's not as cool as I was hoping. And then when you finally beat the game, which the last battle is on the ghost ship, well, the beginning of the battle is at the bottom of the Temple of the Ocean King, and then you transport to the ghost ship to finish the battle. But anyway, so you finish the battle, you get off the ghost ship, you're teleported back to your land, and they're just like, no time has passed at all. No time at all. So it's like, what was that? Just, did it I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, overall, they took these characters from Wind Waker that were beloved, and it just ended up being this, like, okay kind of a thing. I didn't get any more love for them from it. I guess I ended up hating them. One thing I did enjoy about the game is there's this, like, Yeti village, and you show up, and they're like, there is one among us that is of this other race of people, and they're horrible monsters. And my little American mind was sitting there like, oh, this is gonna be your classic, like, kid's story of judging another group of people because your ancestors told you they were bad, but, like, they're just fine, they're as good as you are, like, don't be bigoted. And I was like, okay, it's probably fake that there's one disguised among them. They're being silly. They're not gonna be actually monsters, ha ha ha. And so I find out the one among them that's hiding, and he was a monster! And then you go over to their area of the map, and they're all monsters trying to attack you, and you have to kill them. But it makes me feel bad, because, like, this is one of the first times you see, like, monster intelligence. Because here's one of them disguising himself as the other guys to go live a nice life in their nice village instead of having to be in their crappy wasteland. Anyway, I'm making that out to be more than it actually is. But I don't know. That was the one part that has, like, stuck in my brain deeply. So this one took me 16 days, and it is my third least favorite game. 15 out of 17. There's only 2 games worse than this in the Zelda series. It's all because of the Temple of the Ocean King! If it weren't for that, it'd be fine. Oh, there's also this thing where you, like, trace your ship on the ocean where it's gonna go, and that's just dumb because you don't feel like the Wind Waker, like, yes, I'm setting out, and you can't deviate easily. You have to cancel the path, and it's really annoying. And because you have like a set path, they expect you to be able to fight things, so they're throwing things fighting at you, and your ship is dying because it only has 3 hearts, whereas in Wind Waker your hearts were connected to you, not your ship, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I didn't like it. I didn't like that part. And so, with Phantom Hourglass completed, that leaves us to its successor, Spirit Tracks. And when I began Spirit Tracks, I was 28 pregnant. Still papaya. Yum. So, the interesting thing about Spirit Tracks is Phantom Hourglass was like right after Wind Waker, but Spirit Tracks is like 100 years after Phantom Hourglass. Maybe more. I think they said 100. Yeah, it's a few generations later. So I went into this with low expectations after Phantom Hourglass. I was kind of hoping like they learned from their mistakes previously. So I went into this with low expectations. And in the end, I still don't know what to say about this game. It's like, there's trains, and there's train people, and why did they bother connecting this to Hourglass at all? Apparently, Zelda Tetra from the previous game went and founded this island land of Hyrule here, but there's the grandson of the guy who helps you in the first game in this land. So did they teleport back to where he was living and then go set this up? Or did they find this land in the Wind Waker map? I'm very confused and I shouldn't think about it. And then there's these train people. I don't know what to think about these train people. Apparently they were living there before Zelda got there, and just trains are like a special... I don't know. Oh, and then there's this... The bad guy is like this leprechaun guy? So that's something. Green suit, red hair. I guess that's a leprechaun. And he's evil. And has double horns. Devil leprechaun. Yeah, this game just feels like a fever dream. It's almost like they went, yeah, you can do whatever the heck you want. And the guy was like, well, I love trains. And leprechauns are intriguing. So... Anyway, even though I'm super confused about everything that happened in this game, I did love one thing about this game so deeply, and it's that at the beginning, Zelda gets... I guess she more like gets possessed. So her ghost is flung out of her body. And that is your companion this whole game. Ghost Zelda! But it gets better than that! So this game also has an Ocean of the Temple King whatever, but they fixed it to not be horrible. I was like, they just have to make one thing different and it'll be like bearable. But they made all the things different. So you never have to repeat a level, which is a big thing. The guys patrolling can be killed. Big thing. And lastly, only some levels have time limits. Beautiful, beautiful. I enjoyed it a lot more. Although my criticism of you only remember the temple, or in this case the tower, because that's what you spend most of the game doing, applies here too. I don't remember any other dungeons, just this tower. What is especially fantastic about these towers is when you kill one of the guards, Zelda can possess it! And then you get to boss her around! Anyway, you can go tell her to go do other things. She can go talk to other guards and distract them while you sneak behind, which is fun. You can ride on her back through obstacles. It's really fun. And, like, each of the guards has a different power, so she gets a different power when she takes over that guard, and they did a really excellent job of it. But once again, because of this tower and spending so much time in it, I don't remember any of the rest of the game. Besides being on the train. And this time it makes sense that you have tracks that you map out, unlike on the ship, because you're on a train. However, this time there's killer trains that you cannot kill. And that's annoying. You just kind of gotta navigate around them, and if they happen to be on the same track as you, you turn tail and run, I guess. I don't know. All I remember is being on the train tracks, which was kind of boring. Oh, one way they did make the train kind of fun is that there were bunnies that would be, like, in the background, and if you went for them, there was this game where you could catch them with a net, and that would get you some sort of reward. So that was kind of cool. Oh. And we gotta talk about using the DS. As before, the combat's the same as the last game, so that kind of sucked. This time, they had you playing this little flute instrument thing, but to play it in-game, you had to maneuver the thing back and forth with the touchscreen while also blowing. And in the beginning, it's like 3 notes. You're like, whatever, yeah, like, you can do that. But by the end, they're doing this long thing, and I just couldn't help but imagine, like, you're sick. You're staying home from school because you're sick, and your parent buys you this game to give you something to do to pass the time, and then this happens, and you're like, I can't blow because I'm sick, so what do I do now? It was hard for me being pregnant and having COVID back in June of last year. It was hard to sustain the air until the end for some of the longer ones. I just can't imagine how much that would suck. You buy this game, you spend $40, and then you can't pass it because you can't do this long enough while focusing on doing the notes. And one last thing to show how much of a fever dream this was. This was what the final fight looks like, so you're welcome. I don't know what this game was. But it did take me 7 days, and it is apparently my 10th favorite Zelda game. Although I'll say 8 through 10 are pretty interchangeable. Wrapping up Spirit Tracks was also a wrap-up to that line in the Zelda timeline, and now we're moving to the hero failed! This is if in Ocarina of Time you've lost, and everything plummeted into darkness because of you. All these games are 2D. I was not looking forward to it, because all of them are also kind of old. So I went into this hesitant, but ready to maybe have my biases re-examined. So this part of the timeline begins with Link to the Past. Beginning this leg of the journey, I was 29 weeks pregnant, the size of a winter squash, but imagine it's much bigger. Size of a winter squash. And this guy's like celebrity in this timeline. He ends up in a lot of games. And yeah, he's the main character. And this was also the 3rd Zelda game to come out, the one before Ocarina of Time. So it was interesting. It was very interesting because I'm used to the Ocarina of Time mindset. So this was very different. And I had an okay experience with it. Very mixed feelings in the end around the whole thing. Like, the map was super confusing. And then you end up, the power in this game is that you can teleport between your world of Hyrule to this, like, fallen world that Ganon has messed up. But you can retain your form there. So that's your power. And what makes this element of the game awful is that to get to the fallen world to rescue the 7 maidens, which is your main objective, you have to find these portals, which are hidden under rocks, and I never found any sort of thing that told me where they were. I had to use a guide to find out where they were. I guess back then figured people would just walk around and explore. Nowadays, I'm not gonna do that in a 2D game. I don't got time for that. So, I didn't like that. It's something that if I replayed the game a lot, I would learn where all the portals were, and I would enjoy it, but even just one playthrough, I now know where one portal is. That only one stuck in my mind, so. And the other thing that drove me crazy in this game is combat. You had to get really flipping close to land a hit, but if you touch them, you lose a heart. So, not even if they, like, attack you with a sword. Like, obviously, you lose a heart for that, but, like, if your skin rubs against their skin, you lose a heart, but you have to get really close to hit them. So that was really annoying. In every other game, they give you a little bigger hitbox, so that helps, but not in this game. I used rewind a lot. I almost feel like I can't talk about this game, and if it was good or not, because I used rewind a lot. But maybe it just made the playthrough better for me, so. I feel like I only have negative things to report about this game, but I'll have very mixed feelings about it. It's weirdly nostalgic to me, despite never seeing it played before, never having played it before. Something about it, like, I just feel warm fuzzies towards it. I made my husband play it, so he's playing it right now without using rewind, which is fun to watch. He's dying a lot and having to repeat things a lot. When you die, you start back at the beginning of the temple. It's kind of annoying. If you die in the overworld, you start back at like 3 places. You can choose which one. But I don't know. There's something about the game that gives me warm fuzzies, even though I can only think of like things I disliked about it. I think it's just fun to have that challenge. It is a very challenging game. You will die a lot, but it's also like a reasonable amount of challenge. I don't feel like they're trying to be mean with it or anything. The story was mega nerdy, like total dweeb, in mom's basement, wood paneling, unicorn poster with a moon. Dweeby. Okay? You gotta rescue the 7 maidens. They literally call them maidens. And the guy helping you out, what is his name? Like, Shalahashbran or something like that? And the wizard you gotta defeat is Agamemnon or something. It's so dweeby! It's so 80s, and it slays me. It slays me. It's so dweeby. I wonder if Ocarina of Time is like that, but since I grew up with it, I don't realize how dweeby it is. But this just feels the vibes of 1980s nerddom coming through. Anyway, it took me 4 days to beat, which makes it a nice weeknights game. And I would say, 8th favorite Zelda game. It left like a good impression of me. When I see the graphics, I feel good things. So, that's good. And that Link's journey continues on to the Oracle games. So my journey did too. In the beginning of the Oracle games, I was still 31 weeks pregnant. Imagine a much bigger winter squash than this one is. And apparently Link is feeling pretty restless in Hyrule. So he goes to these other 2 lands to help them out. So each land has a different game. There's ages and there's seasons. I expected these to be more like Pokemon games where the gameplay would be very similar, but they are very different. And I appreciate that. Like, they even have different items in each game that you use, so that's cool. I started with ages. I googled the question, should I do ages or seasons first? And they said ages was more puzzle based. I prefer the puzzle side of Zelda. The combat side, do not have any love in my heart for. So I started with that one. And the puzzles were harder than seasons, but they weren't anything crazy. There were maybe like 3 I had to look up how to do, and that's just, they had like the same kind of puzzle, it just got harder as the game progressed. So like the last group of 3 I had to Google how to do. And Link's big power in ages, it's in the title, you can teleport between ages, 400 years apart. So you're going to the past to do some tinkering, to change the future. I did not like it. The reason I did not like it is I had trouble telling which one I was in, and I like confused the maps of the 2, so I would teleport to the past to go to this thing. I realized the thing I'm looking for is in the future, so that was really annoying. And halfway through the game, before you had portals, so you were like, okay, this is somewhere where I have to go back in time to do something. But partway through the game, you get the ability to go to the past But then you need a portal to go to the future, I think it is. It might be vice versa. And what's annoying about this is basically the game is no longer telling you when you're supposed to teleport. So you just have to be like, well, that's the end of the path I can do here. I guess I'll teleport and see if the path continues. Sometimes it did. Most of the time it did. Sometimes it didn't. I don't know. It just didn't click with my brain where it felt good. And like every time you teleport, you have to play this super long song. It's not super, it's annoying to do. You gotta take out your strummy thing, set it in your item, and then play it. And like, it's just this long process that I dread. And then there's a loading screen. So I dread every time I have to do this, so I never want to do it wrong. Anyway, it made for a time that I did not enjoy. And beyond that is partway through the game, you get a mermaid tail. And I was really excited about this. I get to be a mermaid. This is really, really, really cool. Except that it wasn't, because once you became a mermaid, instead of being able to swim normally, of just like, go this direction, and then you keep going that direction like you do when you're walking in game, now to swim, every step in the water, you gotta tell it to go that way. So, do. Oh my gosh, it was horrible. And before that, swimming, you swam normal, like you did walking. After that, every time you swam, whether you were above or below water, you had to do. Ah, it was so annoying. But as a mermaid, you could go below water and you could see the Zora city, so that was really cool. This game was so cool. It is very, very cool, and I like it so much. It has a very nice story that I'm not super invested in. I think I'm not invested in any, but it's still cool. Like, the queen has been possessed by the baddie, and she is forcing her citizens to construct this tower and not giving them any breaks. So you talk to everyone and they're like, we're working all the time. This really sucks. And that was really interesting. Sticks in my brain. But this swimming thing ruined everything. Oh, there was a whole temple in the water. A whole temple where half the time you're underwater doing things. If my hands hurt before, let me tell you, it was bad now. And one of the, like, weird side elements of this game were these rings you could find and get assessed to see what power they gave you. I didn't get super into the rings, but wow. These could really change your playthrough, and it's random which one you get, so I happened early on to get one that will slowly restore hearts for you, and that was a game changer. I was struggling to get through dungeons and bosses. After that, though, it really, 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 really helped and made things a lot easier. You could have full hearts at any time. You just gave it enough time. I have really positive feelings about this game, but the whole mermaid water part, and you spend a lot of the game in the water, so like this ends up being really annoying. Hopefully they do a remake, because I think they would fix this in a remake, and I would enjoy it a lot more. Anyway, this took me 6 days to beat, and I'm giving it a 12 out of 17. I feel like it deserves higher, but it's just those things that are dragging it down. But let's talk about its sister game, Seasons. I get less warm fuzzies with this game, like about the overall game, but I also enjoyed it more because the mermaid thing never happened. As I said, these games are so different. I was like, when is the mermaid tail gonna happen? When is it gonna change me being able to swim normally? And it just never happened, which was beautiful. And I like it so much more because of that. Even though I feel like in every other way, I like the game less. I do like the power more in this game. So instead of teleporting past to future, you just change the season, and that changes what happens. And normally you can tell what season it needs to be. Like, oh, if I do that, these flowers will bloom, and then I'll be able to use them to jump. The one I get confused about, though, is winter, because you don't really see a notion that winter would change it, because, you know, snow happens, but there's nothing to be like, this is where the snow would happen if you changed it. So that one did stump me sometimes. Anyway, the story, much weaker than Seasons. You don't have any check-in with the bad guy. And I would say even the bosses in this game are much easier. I did have the ring for this whole playthrough. I transferred over the heart ring from the other game to this game. The fun part of linking games. And so that helped a lot. One thing going into this game, I was like, the map's gonna be half as small because you don't have the whole world from 400 years ago that you're going between. but they remedied that with having a land below Subnova, I think it's called. I can't quite remember. But that was really interesting. And there's this like race of hooded people that live down there. And there's a lot of missions that you end up having to go down there to get to other temples and things. And something about that land is very interesting to me. And there was another part where to open this gate, I think to get to the bad guy's palace? Can't quite remember. You had to find 4 stones throughout the land, and that was really fun, getting those and slotting them in. And you could grab them anytime throughout the game, so that was cool. The final boss in this game really sticks out to me. He was fun. I think out of every final boss, he was the most interesting. Took me a few tries, but you had to like climb on his hand and then jump and slash at his ruby. Difficult and enjoyable. Overall, I'm gonna say Seasons is a worse game than Ages, like story-wise, and even like vibe-wise, but I liked the power in it better, and I liked that it didn't have the mermaid tail. So, took me 5 days to beat, but I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 17. 3 places above Ages, which is, I don't know. And let's talk about the ending you unlock by playing both games. If you defeat the boss in one game, and then link it to another game and defeat that boss, you get the Ganon fighting ending. So first you fight his mommies, and you beat their butts like you did in Ocarina, and then you can fight Ganon! And that fight was really cool. I really expected it to be longer and drawn out. Like, I don't even think there was a castle you had to traverse to get up to them. You just, like, beat the other final boss, and they were like, hey, you come over here, you gotta save Zelda from Ganon. She got kidnapped because she was trying to come over here and help, even though you told her not to. But yeah, having played both Oracle games, I enjoyed them both, and I think they're worth playing. I don't think I'll replay them much more in my life, maybe 1 or 2 more times, but they're good. Link's Awakening, and I played the remaster Switch version of this one, which brings us to week 31 of the pregnancy. The baby is now the size of a honeydew. Oh. And I'm gonna come right out and say I did not like it. I know it's kind of a cult classic thing. People really, love this one, hence why it got a remake, but I just didn't enjoy it. My theory is that people loved it so much because it was the first portable Zelda, and I think it was also the first accessible Zelda. Like the 3 Zeldas before it, you would have to have bought a super expensive NES or SNES, and then the cartridges were really expensive. I think Game Boys were pretty affordable along with their games. So my theory is this is people's first exposure to the Zelda series, and because it was portable, they played the heck out of it. And it was probably one of the few good games on Game Boy that was worth playing the heck out of. So, I don't know, but there was a lot of love for it, and I just did not care for it. Spoilers about this one, if you haven't played it. So, you are in some sort of whale's dream world, and you are defeating the nightmares of that dream world, and the nightmare's goal is to keep the whale asleep, so they can rule the nightmare land, the dreamland, and your goal is to wipe the nightmares out, but they're guilting you into not wiping them out. They're like, if you kill us, this will destroy the dream world and everyone you met will be gone. But I'm like, it's a dream world, so they never existed, and me, a person who actually existed, is trapped here, so you're not selling me on this at all. And because it originally came out as a Game Boy game, it's very short. The dungeons are pretty simple. They're good. They're really good for a Game Boy game. But for 2023, I wouldn't say the same thing. And as I said, I played the Switch version, and the graphics were cuckoo coconuts. I think they were based off of the 3DS games graphics, but then they made Link look really dumb. And it's just this toy look, which I guess matches the dream aspect. I just didn't like looking at it. And there was this trading quest in the game, which I really enjoyed in the previous game. In the Oracle games, they had trading quests, but they were just to power up your sword, so they weren't required. This one was required, and it was annoying to do. I don't know if I could have done it without a guide. I guess the game has these phone stations throughout it to tell you what to do if you're stuck, so it would have told me that if I was stuck. But that whole thing, wouldn't have done it naturally. One thing I did like is Marlin's dad, which is like the chick who you meet first thing in the game. He's always getting into trouble trying to get different foods like mushrooms or honey or whatever, and you find him every now and then. I wish they played into that even more, because that is something I did enjoy. And I was like, bummer, Marlin's dad is gonna die when I beat this game. That's kind of sad. Once again, this isn't really a game I would complain about and call super bad. It's just one that I was never invested in. And for that reason, I'm ranking it as 13 out of 17 Zelda games. Link's Awakening is a wrap-up to the hero from Link to the Past. He is dead now. We're moving on to Link Between Worlds. 2 weeks later, I'm now 33 weeks pregnant. Still a honeydew, although a larger honeydew. This game takes place like 100, couple hundred, few hundred years after Link to the Past, but you are in the same map that you were for Link to the Past, but you know, some updates because it's so much later. I think this game might be why I'm a little bit nostalgic for A Link to the Past, because I had played this game previously. This was the first 2D Zelda game I played, and I think the first Zelda game I beat, which is basically saying this game is really, really, really easy for me to be able to beat it. Probably the easiest game in all of the Zelda games. It's still good, and I think worth playing, but it is very easy. You can just shut your brain off and go. For this game, you have the same transfer between Light World and Dark World that you do in Link to the Past, but you also get the power of flattening to walls, which makes for some really interesting puzzles. I think it was a fun power to have, and good things came of it. Then in this game, they made the portals so much easier to notice. There are cracks in the wall that have this like black eking out, and then you have to suction into the wall and transfer into them. So another interesting mechanic they do is that you don't acquire the weapons in the temples, which end up making the temples shorter, I feel like. Yeah, they're much shorter because of that. Because you don't have, like, the first half of acquiring the item and then the second half of getting to the boss. You just have getting to the boss. This one guy moves into your house and sets up shop, and there you can rent and buy weapons. If you die, they return to him, and you have to rent them, so it's better to buy them. And just as the last game, you have a bunch of sages you gotta rescue, but in this game, they aren't all maidens. But more importantly, they introduce you to all of them beforehand, so that is very helpful. You have some buy-in for each of them. You care a little bit, not that much, but a little bit about all of them. And you are wanting to save them because of that. I think there's one or two where I'm like, I know we met, but I have no clue who you are. Who are you? The story feels very budget sequel straight to DVD vibes, but like it's still enjoyable. Like Cinderella 3, like it's worth watching. It's not gonna blow your mind. Maybe it will, but probably not. So in the end, nothing to super complain about, but nothing to really rave about. It happened. It was fine. This one took me 4 days to complete, and I give it 11 out of 17. And now, after such a long journey through most of the 2D Zeldas, I was back at what started it all, the original Zelda on NES. At this point, I am 35 weeks pregnant. Still, the baby is the size of a honeydew. Scrumptious, scrumptious. So, with this Zelda, I heard it was hard, and not in like a brain hard, but just dumb hard. Like, there's lots of things you don't know you should do. So, I guided this so hard. Like, didn't do anything unless the guide told me to. And the guide started me out by leveling me up, so it had me go here and like reveal all these little secret areas. I think the game reveals the secret to you in the dungeons. Every now and then you come across like an old man just sitting there and he'll tell you some riddle to help you in the game if you can figure them out. So, yeah, the guy just told me where all of those were. If you're playing on the Switch, there's the SP edition, and that basically starts you out with all the upgrades, so you don't have to go get them yourself. This is just more hearts, stronger sword, armor, things like that, I think. So, I did all that first, and that was hard to do because I was so weak, and I kept getting hit. But once I had all those upgrades, this game became pretty easy, especially with Rewind, which I also used a lot here. So I had the guide, I had Rewind, and the game was easy, probably because of that. If it weren't for that, yeah, without the upgrades, it would have been really hard, because I would be one-shot half the time. And I also wouldn't know what I was doing, so I'd be like wasting health, dying over and over, and not making any progress because I didn't know what the heck I should be doing. Wouldn't recommend this game. I guess back then you just had time to dink around, but these days I don't got time to dink around. I got a life. I can't spend my time dying in a video game over and over, not getting anywhere. However, I did try to do the dungeons without the guide. But the first dungeon I did, I walked right into the boss room pretty quickly. I was like, oh, here's the boss! And I defeated him pretty easily. And then I was like, oh, there's no item for dungeons? I guess it's the first game. They hadn't done that yet. And then I looked in the guide and it was like, oh yeah, you get this item from the dungeon. Some of the items you don't need. Some of them you need to progress in the game. So I was like, okay, from now on, we will be using the guide to know where the item is so I can get that before having to do the boss. And while the original dungeons weren't too bad to get through with or without a guide, although you might miss something, the last dungeon was near impossible. They like made it this crazy maze. I cannot imagine doing this without a guide. I guess you would just get used to dying and going back to the final dungeon. But I followed the guide to a T. Like, half the time it was having me bomb walls to do shortcuts. And in this game, the bombable walls, there's nothing there to indicate that you can bomb it. You just hope at least is something. I mean, on the map, sometimes you see a room. So you might be like, alright, let's bomb it to see if it'll connect to this room. Sometimes, though, there's bombable walls to rooms that aren't on the map. Those tend to be, like, fairies or something. Bonus-wise. Anyway, yeah, that dungeon was a nightmare. But I had the master key, which unlocks any door. I got that from the last dungeon. And so I got through it pretty quickly. It was still hard, even with rewind and knowing exactly where I was going. So I don't even know how I would ever. I just spend a ton of time on it, which is not an investment worth making these days when there's just so much good entertainment out there. And the story, it was learning reader level. There really wasn't much to it, not really much to comment about. Like, I don't think the point of video games back then was to indulge in story. It was just to, I guess, explore and wander around and be like, ooh, what's this? I don't know. It was the beginnings of in-home consoles, so. The original Zelda, using the guide, only took me 2 days to complete, so super quick, easy game if you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And I give this one a 16 out of 17. Not the worst Zelda game, but it's just not super worth playing. And that brings us to the final Zelda game in this timeline, Zelda 2. It's a sequel to the original Zelda. And at this point, I am still 35 weeks pregnant. And still the baby is the size of a honeydew. This is my first time in my life I've bought a honeydew. I've had it pre-sliced. It's not as good pre-sliced. I like this a lot better. So, the original Zelda was barely worth my time, and that was with a guide doing a speedy playthrough of it. I got into Zelda 2, and I was like, alright, let's do this last game before finally Breath of the Wild. And I spent 30 minutes in the game, died in the temple, the first temple, and I went, no, it's just not worth it. I'm not going to enjoy this game. I'm not going to use my brain to figure out what I should do next. Well, these games, you don't even really use your brain. You just wander around until you figure out what you should be doing, or stumble upon what you should be doing. So, I decided I wasn't going to play this one. Well, I played it for 30 minutes. I decided I wasn't going to beat it. I wasn't going to play it for more than those 30 minutes. And the plan was just to watch a speed through of it. But my husband was like, oh, you're not willing to play it? And then I will play it. If it's too hard for you, that's perfect for me. And he did! He beat it! He used rewind a lot. But I had the pleasure of watching him struggle through playing it. It was awful. It was an awful, awful game. It's bad. Okay, so it's a side scroller. It's just really freaking hard. But it's not hard in a way that I feel is at all satisfying. Every little enemy you come across, well, most of them, in the temples, is difficult to defeat. Like, not quite boss level, but like half boss level. You spend a good 2-3 minutes, which is not what I want when I'm in a Zelda game. If it's an overworld enemy or an enemy in the temple that isn't a mini-boss, I just want to and be done with it. Like, small obstacles. We don't want Lionel levels of effort defeating every little enemy we come across. So that was really annoying. And when you're in the overworld, they'll have these like monsters pop out of the grass. it's like Pokemon almost. You're walking in the grass. You never know when an attack is going to happen. But they pop out and they like scurry around. And you have this opportunity to dodge. So you have this stressful moment come upon you at any time when you're walking around outside. So you're trying to dodge. And they're so skittery, it's very hard to. And when you do run into one, it's not a one-on-one fight with a monster. It's like a side-scrolling level you gotta go through and get out the side of, and you have monsters in the way that you might have to fight, or maybe you can dodge them. It's just having them pop up and having them be possibly avoidable. It's so stressful when you do have to do it, just so annoying. Like, oh, I wouldn't have had to do this if I just dodged better. And oh, it's not good. It's like Pokemon on steroids. It's already annoying when you're in a cave and you never know when a Zubat's gonna pop out. But now it's like, the Zubat is gonna pop out, and maybe you can dodge it, and if you don't, you have to fight 5 Zubats. Anyway, really annoying. And the temples don't have much theming or anything. They're just like a series of tunnels, so they're super boring and easy to get lost in because there's not a lot to distinguish one thing from another. Story-wise, I know when I started the game, Zelda was laying in this temple thing asleep. I don't know anything else about the story. I only know that because my husband died so many times and started back there. So I saw a lot of Zelda sleeping. Oh, and the worst part of this game is throughout it, there's little power-ups tucked away, hidden. Like, I don't think any of them are in tunnels. They're in the overworld, in tucked away places. And we were just like, oh, if we get a power up, good. You're stronger, so that's great. But we get to the last village, and to get, I think, the key for the final temple or something like that, you need to have every power up. There was one we skipped because my husband was just too low on health, and it wasn't worth it going out of our way for it, so we skipped it. And now we had to go back and redo it. Obviously, it was easier because he was more used to the game and stronger at that point. But if we didn't have a guide, we wouldn't have even known what to do. I think it just drains your power, and you're like, you need to have enough to overcome it or something like that. So that sucked. I had my husband level up, like he was fighting monsters to level up to get more power, because I thought that's what he had to do, like, oh, you just need more power. No, you needed to get all their little power units out there. I'm not describing this right, but basically, that's the gist. Anyway, it was awful. I can't imagine playing the first one, because the first one, I think it's okay. And then going to the second one and having it be so different back then. And then, after that, Link to the Past comes out. Like, what whiplash would that be? Like, Zelda, okay. Zelda, bad, bad, bad. Zelda, pretty good? I think I would be scarred and just always ready for the Zelda series to be really bad at some point and for them to do a flop like Zelda 2 again. So, no days for how long it took me to play this, because I did not play through it all. But this is least favorite Zelda, 17 out of 17. With Zelda 2 finished, that line of the timeline is now completed, and I could finally move on to what I was looking forward to my entire several months of playing, and that was Breath of the Wild. At this point, I'm 37 weeks pregnant. My baby is the size of a watermelon! So big! And so scrumptious. Breath of the Wild. What do I even say about my beloved Breath of the Wild? I love this game so much. I think one of my favorite things about games is the atmosphere, the world you can explore, and just being taken to different places, and just seeing the creativity people put into them in developing the stages, I don't know, environments, I don't know quite what to call it. But that is definitely my favorite part of Breath of the Wild, is just this huge, expansive map, and all the stuff they managed to pack into it. I love climbing the mountains. Like, I'm in my head singing, climb every mountain, every time I reach the top of one, and never knowing what you're gonna find on the other side. Like my first playthrough, they told me to go to Kakariko Village, and instead of taking the path that would have been very convenient, I'm climbing mountains to get there. And that moment when you climb the mountain and you finally see Kakariko Village on the other side, that was awesome. I just love it so much. It inspired me to go hiking the first summer I played it, because I enjoyed it so much in game, being outside and walking around in nature in the game. I was like, let's do this in real life! When it comes to the story, I really enjoy the Divine Beast missions, like leading up to them. It's really fun to have a member of the nearby race accompany you on this mission. Like, I gotta say, I really like Sidon. The other ones, I didn't care as much about. They're also good though. But working the races in and having them be such a big part of the story, I think that's one thing in Zelda games I really love when they do that. Like in Majora's Mask they did. It makes me feel more connected to the kingdom. The divine beasts themselves, I do not like them as much as a traditional temple, but I think they're fine. I think they're enjoyable. I like the mission leading up to them more than the actual thing itself, but they're fine. You feel accomplished when you unlock each little... But I did love the champions! I think they're so cool. And I just love the idea of them using a member of every race to defeat the great evil. Because in the past games, it always felt like... Why is Link shouldering this entire thing? You have all these races. Why aren't y'all coming together and getting things done together to defeat this awful Ganon? So, it's really perfect for them to finally come together to do something. And it pulls on my heartstrings that they died, but they're still there with you in ghost form to help you through your journey. Oh, and I love their powers. Mostly Rivali's Gale. It's like the one you hate the most has the coolest power, which kind of sucks. Mipha's Grace, also great. It's nice to have that backup if you die, and I miss that playing Tears of the Kingdom. The shrines. I feel like that is a big chunk of the game, and I like them. It's a nice bite-sized puzzle. It's a little break as you're exploring to go do a little bit of puzzle solving, so I love that. Overall, this game has so much to do, but I've never felt overwhelmed by it. I felt ready to take on whatever they were putting on my plate in that moment. It wasn't like, oh, should I do this or this or this? It was like, okay, nah. And yeah, I did an all shrines playthrough, so I played a good chunk of this game, and I just thoroughly enjoy it and look forward to future playthroughs. The story, as in like the memories part of it, I hate that you have to find them. I mean, it's fun, it's challenging, but like you have to be really into the game to find the memories. And I just feel like they are such an important part of the game that I wish they didn't bury them so much. I know like you're given a mission early on to go find them, but unless you play a ton and get really familiar with the map, it's a pretty difficult quest. It's cute, it's cool idea, execution, I just feel like a lot of people probably missed out on that part of the game, and I did like the memories. They made you feel more connected to Zelda, while you didn't really get to see much of her in the actual game, so it made you want to go save her. In the end, this game took me 7 days to complete, and I adore it. It is my favorite Zelda game ever. It hits a certain sweet spot for me in so many ways. And so, I finished Breath of the Wild with a week to spare before Tears of the Kingdom, and I got it May 12th and began playing it. At this point, I'm 38 weeks pregnant, still the size of a watermelon. Oh. And of course, this game is just so good. I went into it with trying to have no expectations, because I didn't know if they could pull it off. I hadn't watched many trailers besides like the announcement one and the one after it, so I didn't really know what to expect, what I was coming into. And they did so good. Like, this was a hard thing to pull off, because you need to be true to Breath of the Wild, a game people loved. But this also needs to be more than just DLC. This needs to be a game that, like, in my mind, I can separate out from Breath of the Wild despite having the same graphics. And they did a brilliant job of that. I think a lot of people had low expectations, because it was like, geez, how are you going to make a sequel to Breath of the Wild, which had so much going on, and it was so good? How are you going to do that in a new way? And they did it. They pulled it off. I think having brand new abilities really separates it out from the old game. I'm going to come out and say it. I prefer the old abilities. That's why Breath of the Wild is my number one, and this one is not. These abilities, I don't know. I just feel like they don't mesh as well together. And the puzzles you solve with them, it's a much lower amount that you can. Like, they just had trouble coming up with puzzles for them, because the Ascend ability, and obviously building things, and Rewind, they end up making it so you can kind of do whatever the heck you want. It's hard to make closed puzzles around, so that's something I was kind of disappointed by. It made shrines a lot less puzzly. So many of them were blessing shrines, and it might just be that I feel that way because a lot of the ones at the end are blessing shrines. The shrines are so easy to see in this game that the ones that do have puzzles in them you probably do first, and the ones at the end that are hard to find are the ones where you're taking the rock and transporting it somewhere else, and sometimes those are puzzles. Sometimes you just have to carry it and it's not that hard. And then a lot of the ones you're doing at the end are the ones in caves, and sometimes those just end up being blessing shrines. And I feel like this game had more combat shrines. I prefer these combat shrines over the previous ones because the Breath of the Wild ones were all just too similar. So I did like these combat ones better, but I don't like combat in Zelda. So every time I walked into a combat shrine, I was like, why do I have to do this? But I know other people probably enjoyed them. Just wish there were more puzzle shrines. And I swear half of the puzzle shrines I did them wrong. Because I was trying to do the way I think they wanted me to do it. And I was like, this is too hard. We're just going to rewind this and jump on it and screw whatever they were trying to do. But maybe that's what they wanted in the end. Who knows? Who knows? It is funny watching my husband play it and seeing how differently he'll solve some of the shrines. I think the building power is super cool. And they did a really good job of not forcing you to use it very often. It's like an option to build cars and use those, and it can be fun. But they're not all the time making you do it. The times they did make you do it, it was just small things. Because I just never got into the building thing. My brain couldn't wrap around it coming right off of Breath of the Wild. So I only used it when the story had me use it. And I feel like they weren't forcing it on me too badly. It is one of those things where some players probably aren't going to like it. And others are going to really, really enjoy it. My second favorite part of this game was the payoffs they had for things in the previous game. That was the coolest part of having a direct sequel, because other games have had sequels, but they didn't really pay off anything that was in the first game. And this one definitely did. Like, you had a love letter mission in Breath of the Wild, and then later on you find the two and they're still together and hanging out and things, and that's really cool. Or like in the first game, there's this guy creeping on this one girl, and now in this game, she's married to some other guy, and that previous guy is now creeping on some other girl. And there's just all sorts of little things in the game where if you really got into the nitty-gritty of Breath of the Wild, it pays off now, seeing where they are in this game. So I really love that in this game. Every person I feel like you could have been invested in, they made sure to follow up with those people in this game. And I just love that. My probably third favorite thing in this game, I'll get to the first, I promise, is the side quest with Cece. As you can see in the name, Shroomy. I love mushrooms. I love getting the mushroom hat. And I think the side quest overall was just really well done. And I really, really enjoyed it. And that hat, I love the most. Okay, so the first thing I love in this game is the caves. I just... As someone who loves exploring, every time I came across a cave, I was so excited. I don't think there was ever a time where I was like, oh no, a cave. I guess I'll explore it because I see it and I'm here now. Every time I was like, a cave! Let's go! And I think what I enjoyed most about the caves were the Misco treasures that you could get from them, the clothing. I just love clothes and like seeing items and such as that, and the biggest collectible thing in this game is the clothing. So seeing those caves and the way they did it was so good. You walk into a cave and you see the Misco banners, so you know somewhere in this darn cave there's gonna be an outfit, and sometimes it's gonna be super hidden and sometimes it's gonna be a little easier to find. But when you do find like the super hidden ones, you're gonna walk behind a waterfall or something, and then there it is, and it's stand. It's so cool! I love it so much. I also just think the caves are so cool. There's like 6 basic cave textures that they use, but just all the different windings. Some went a little too long, but all the different ways they did them. I love the ones in the Gerudo Desert. They're very Indiana Jonesy, and they're very fun to complete. So yeah, caves. I did them all, and I loved them all so much. The last one I did was the Cuckoo nesting one by Kakariko Village. And that one was so cute. It was a very small one, but just walking in there and seeing all these little nests. It was very cute. Very, very cute. The story in this game is sick. I love it so much. Zelda is a boss. Ganon is freaking, like, oh, I'm scared for the first time in my life of Ganon. I don't want to talk about the final fight, because I know a lot of people haven't gotten there, but, like, it's so good. I enjoyed it very much. Out of any final battle, it had the most cool factor of just, like, yes, what? Woo! It was really good. And the memories this time, they, like, did giant billboards for them. This is where you find the memory. Come and get it. I actually cleared them pretty early in the game, which was a little bit of a bummer. It is nice because you know what's happening as you're going through the game. Whereas before, I did the memories at the end. So I did this whole thing even though I wasn't invested yet. And then the memories got me invested. So it was nice to be invested early on. But I did all the memories early. And then I did a bunch of other stuff. And then I did the final boss fight. So it felt a little disconnected. But I think this is the best Zelda story out of any game. It was really solid. I mean, obviously it could be better. I would love if things were more in depth and such, but it had the most going on. I was the most invested I've ever been. Okay, so for some negatives, why I'm ranking this lower than Breath of the Wild. Mainly, this game was just really overwhelming. I can blame that on how I played the game, but I feel like the structure of the game also lended to it. Part of it is that it's a sequel. I'm familiar with this map. The first playthrough, I went slower through the map because I was scared of what I might find. Now I know everything, so I'm popping around. But the game itself added to this a lot with the towers that shoot you up in the air, because now you can go a lot further faster. And I would pop over, discover a quest, be not really in the mood for it, and then easily pop over to another place, discover a quest. And so I have all these things in my head that I should be doing that I don't want to do. Oh, and they kept telling me to go to Lurlin Village to help them out, but I don't want to help them out, so now that's another thing in my mind that I need to go do. I just felt like things were piling on. It might have been the way I played. I wasn't dealing with things right as they came up, so maybe that was my own problem. But yeah, I ended up feeling very overwhelmed. And part of the overwhelm was the depths. You drop in there, you find this whole nother map, and you're like, I already have so much on my plate. And now I have this. And one tip I wish I could give myself now looking back is, don't even bother with the depths. There's nothing down there. There's some supplies you can get, some enemies you can kill for supplies. The main thing to go down there and dink around a lot down there is to upgrade your battery. The thing about your battery is, if you're not building things that you use frequently, which I was not doing, you don't need a big battery. So I ended up getting the full battery and then upgrading it again. I was dinking around down there so much. I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I had basically ignored it. And the other big problem with the depths is they give you this empty map, and to fill it, you gotta find all 120 light roots, and that is a challenge to me. Like, the shrines were never a challenge, because I wasn't given this checklist of an empty map. I just knew the number, but no one even told me the number besides online. Like, nothing in the game told me. So it wasn't something I felt like I had to do. I felt like I had to get all the towers to complete the map. And there aren't that many towers, so it's not that hard. But down in the depths, I felt like I had to get every light route, and that took so long, and I wasn't enjoying it. Anyway, that might just be a personal thing, but I feel like the game is kind of challenging you to do that. But it's not worth it, because there's not really anything going on in the depths, unless you want to fight every little Yiga outpost. Or collect every little shred of everything. I don't think I'm alone in that. My husband, he burnt out on his playthrough. He hasn't finished yet, and I think a lot of the burnout came from wasting times in the depths, because there's not a lot you get done progression-wise down there. And I know my brother spent quite a bit of time in the depths, and he ended up taking a decently long pause. He finally went back and finished the game to make sure it was finished, but I feel like the depths are a big burnout. I'm hoping some DLC comes that livens them up and makes them more worth being down there. I think my problem, though, is that I didn't use vehicles down there. I should have. I think that would have made things better. But my cheat was, I would find a light route, I would teleport to a hole above, dive down, and then glide to it. I'm just so used to Breath of the Wild. My next playthrough, I vow to be better about using vehicles, but this one I did not, and the depths was a drag because of that, and it being so spacious and nothing really down there. The places where you did do things in the depths, though, like fighting Master Kogai, I like those. Those were fun. And then the other big thing they added was the sky, which was cool. It reminded me of Castle in the Sky, and I like that. But after a while, you notice that, like, the depths, it's just a bunch of repeats of things. It's just a ton of copy and paste of the same thing. So you arrive, and you go, oh, I've done this before. I'll do it again in a different way, but I've seen this exact thing. Which is kind of boring, but it's also really good when they add so much new stuff to the game for it to be copy and paste. So you're not as overwhelmed because every time you run into, you know what you're supposed to do. So I don't know. It's this balance of this is boring, but also they can't be too crazy because then it'll be too overwhelming. So I get where they're coming from. So I ended up playing Tears of the Kingdom for 165 hours, which, according to my Switch, I played Breath of the Wild for 130 hours. So the thing about that is that 130 hours number is 2 games combined. It was this last playthrough I did that took 7 days, so about like 20-ish hours. And then it is also the playthrough I did a couple years ago where I did all the shrines. So my all-shrine playthrough of Breath of the Wild was 110 hours, but my all-shrine playthrough Tears of the Kingdom was 165, 55 more hours. And people will argue that more game time is good, but I would argue that was too much for me. Too much for me. And granted, the goals I set were too much. I should have dialed it back, so I didn't play an extra 50 hours. Too much to do in Tears of the Kingdom. I think this is a wake-up call for me that from now on in Zelda, I can't 100%. Like, in Breath of the Wild, I didn't do all the Koroks because I knew that was too much to do. In this game, I shouldn't have collected all the outfits because that was too much to do. I was hopping around the depths, checking every mine to get every outfit because I love collecting things so much. It was too much. Too much. Too much. I should have chosen to do less. In fact, Tears of the Kingdom took me so long to play, I had planned for it to take just the 2 weeks before my baby would come. I finished it 2 months after it released. So by the time I finished it, my baby was 6 weeks old. Overall though, fantastic game. Wonderful. I'm looking forward to playing Breath of the Wild again more, but I feel like some point in the future, maybe 5 years from now, I will be excited to replay Tears of the Kingdom. I'm gonna give it 3rd favorite game out of 17. There's just so much in it that I'm scared to go back. But I'll have a grasp of what I should and shouldn't do, so that's good. So there you have it. The journey of playing through every Zelda game. And I did it in timeline order. Did I think that added anything to it? No. The stories aren't that, like, intermeshed. I guess it was kind of nice to do all the 2Ds next to each other because then I got into a flow and I was used to how they played. I think if I did 2D, then a 3D, then a 2D, then a 3D, it might have been harder adjusting back and forth. I think the next time I play through them all, if there is a next time, there will be more pregnancies. So there probably will be another play through all the Zelda's pregnancy to get through the pregnancy. I think next time I'll play them in the order they came out. I think it'll be more interesting seeing what they add to each game back to back rather than trying to parse out the story that was never really there, but that they claim there's some sort of connection between all the games. There you have it. It's nice to wrap up that part of my life and be done with this Zelda era. It was a good time, and it very successfully got me through my pregnancy, so that was good. I didn't go crazy. I wasn't depressed at any point. Thank you, Zelda. And here he is. The man, the myth, the legend himself, the little human made while playing every Zelda game. Look at the camera. Look at the camera. Oh, isn't he cute? Oh.